The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
Hey, this is Matt Landry, the voice of Anakin Skywalker in Star Wars The Clone Wars. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars. This is where the fun begins.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
You're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, where we talk about everything connected to that galaxy far, far away. From movies to books, TV shows, and more, we're looking at the deeper themes and meanings found in the Star Wars universe. And be sure to follow The Secrets of Star Wars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, your favorite podcast app, or on the StarQuest YouTube channel. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, on X where we are at SQPN, or on Instagram where we are at StarQuest Network. And be sure to get your official Secrets of Star Wars gear at sqpn.com/merch. I'm your host, Jeff Haecker, and joining me tonight is Kathryn Laffrey. Hey, Kathryn.
Hey, Jeff.
All right, so we will be discussing episode 4 of Andor season 2, but before we do that, I thought it'd be good to get your kind of impressions of the last arc or the first arc of season 2, because I think you were just on the first episode. So just kind of as a whole, just any impressions or thoughts or anything you want to get out there about your experience of the episodes 1 through 3 of Andor season 2.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to watch Andor. I force myself to watch it because it's just not what I'm expecting in this time period, because I'm such a big fan of Thrawn. And so just, seeing background information like this, it's like, it's okay. It's not grabbing me. And then they'll make references to things. For example, the big harvest planet that's been referenced in Tales of the Jedi, also in other books and in the Rebels, where the Empire would come in and essentially take over these planets. I'm not feeling the takeover of the planet. You get them coming around checking people's IDs, but it just seemed like too small of a group to come check a huge planet that's essential for feeding the Empire's war machine. So it just kind of threw me off a little with that. And then, of course, Brasso, really? That was unnecessary. Just, all the stuff that happened in that one episode drove me nuts. I did not like just the running off to this, the panic over that, which leads to someone dying. And you're like, okay, and since when does there a stormtrooper that can be a sharpshooter? But anyway, yeah. And then the attempted rape scene. I did not care for that in Star Wars. Not necessary. I get it. They're trying to do a military thing. I don't care for it. I don't like it when it's done in any movie. It's not. I mean, granted, she survived it. She fought her way through it, but what they show sometimes just pushes it too far. It's not necessary to show even as much as they did. I don't like it. I would have rather they just cut to him going in there and then him stumbling out. Didn't need the whole fight scene. So, my personal point of view on that one.
Gotcha. Yeah, it was definitely shocking to see in Star Wars, especially. And yeah, I mean, I think I wish they had some kind of just warning ahead of the episode of, there will be some kind of adult content or something, just because I don't think many kids are really watching this, but people may be watching it with their kids or with their families, and that could be something to warn people about. But all right, well, And it looks like we might have a surprise visitor joining us here. Hey, John, how are you?
Hello. I guess I'm doing okay.
Hey, glad you made it, John.
Joining the podcast in progress.
Yeah, okay. It's a little slow on this side, so hopefully I won't run into other issues.
All right. Well, so as we mentioned, we were discussing episode 4 of season 2 of Andor. This episode is titled Space Miserable. No, I'm joking. It's titled Ever Been to Gorman, also known as Space France. And there will be some more references to that later in my notes. But the episode summary I have is 1 year after the events on Mina Rao and 3 years before the Battle of Yavin, Cassian and Bix are hiding out on Coruscant, working for Luthen and in a relationship. Cyril is working on Gorman for his job as a cover to infiltrate and report on the Gorman front resistance to the Empire, who is building an armory. He meets Rylance, their leader, and reports back to Dedra. Lonnie, who is Luthen's mole in the ISB, learns that Dedra is in charge of Gorman, and he reports it to Luthen. And so in response, Luthen prepares to send Cassian to Gorman to determine if the Gorman front would benefit, if Luthen's cell would benefit from assisting the Gormans. Wilman also arrives at Saw Gerrera's base on Dakar, which is the future resistance base in The Force Awakens, to teach them how to use a machine to extract Rhydonium fuel, and Mon Mothma tries and fails to stop a bill granting more powers to the ISB. So, yeah, kind of a lot of setting things up, not a lot of action in this episode, but I like to always start with getting impressions. So, Kathryn, we'll start with you. What were your impressions of this episode?
It was very gloomy and depressing, and I watched it twice, and both times I think I actually fell asleep because it was depressing, if that makes sense. So that's my impression of this. Again, it's like people in very dreary situations. And I don't know. It just seems like I know that the Force isn't in this, but I feel like there's a morality missing too. And it really bothers me.
Gotcha. And what about you, John?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a gloomy episode. I also, though, I'm just disappointed. I think I mentioned it last week about the way after the third episode, it was exciting. And then just to jump a year in the future, I was anxious to see what would have happened soon after what happened in episode 3. But it was also taking the position of, building, I guess, the next 3 chapters. So had to lay out, and it was a lot slower moving storyline too. But I guess as we get further into war, it's going to become gloomier, or that things become more difficult. And so I don't know. But overall, yeah, it wasn't like my favorite episode or most exciting. It was just feeling like it was trying to lay out the groundworks. But the problem is when you're looking at it, at least, episode by episode, it's hard to see, the overall plan of things, how it's going to play out. But it just, yeah. I kind of...
Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, I mean, and without spoiling, I mean, this, like I've said before, and others have said, the way Andor is set up is a little bit different. It's not like an 8-episode visual storytelling type of thing. There's a lot of dialogue. It's a lot of setting up, kind of, as I've heard it described as setting the table. And usually with Andor, it's a couple episodes of kind of setting the table for your meal, kind of moving the pieces into place, and then you get the big payoff with an action scene. And it's especially this way in this season because they're doing 2 episodes leading up to the third, and that's all taking place. That's all kind of one part of a year, and then you jump ahead. So, and especially this part, they've been setting up the Ghormans since the episode 1 of this season. And if you've seen Rebels, as I've talked about, there's a definite reference. I mean, the Ghormans are referenced there, but you don't really know anything about it until now. So, as a Rebels fan, I like that they've gone back and are now filling in that story. And yeah, I wish I do wish they had 5 seasons of the show and they could do, each season is a full year, but that would also take forever and take more money than Disney wants to spend on it. So I do hope down the road we get kind of books and things to fill in here. But yeah, I mean, I think overall I did enjoy it, but yeah, I mean, I would agree it was on the slower side, but I'm okay with that, especially the way they dropped it is you can watch the next one and then the next one right away. You don't have to wait. And if you're coming to the season late, you can watch it all and you don't have to wait week to week. So I think if it was week to week, it would have felt a lot slower and a lot more like, okay, I'm ready to move past this and see the next thing. But with the 3 episode, drops at a time, you don't have to wait. So, all right. So the next note I have on here is that Gorman I think they're definitely pointing to this, and we kind of, I think y'all talked about it in the first episode, Kathryn, about the Empire, kind of setting up the Holocaust, essentially of the Ghormans, but we kind of get that next part here because the Ghorman, we don't really see much of Ghorman in the first episode of the first arc, but this is the first time we're really getting into Ghorman and who they are, and it's definitely reminding me of France, like and for any history buffs, it's reminding me of France, leading up to World War II, or even Les Mis, which the next couple episodes do even give more vibes of Les Mis if you've seen that movie or play. Mm-hmm. But what did y'all think of the Ghormans? There's some interesting things about their language because it's not a real language. It sounds kind of like French and sometimes in other languages because it is kind of made up as kind of an amalgamation of those and kind of things taken from both. But it's actually a created language. So, but what did y'all think of the Ghormans?
I mean, the opening shot of Gorman was definitely French Alps, or what's the little city-state between Spain and France? There's a tiny little city-state there.
Is that Alsace?
It made me feel like, okay, this must be it, because, I appreciate the visuals so far in the first 3, after having, just been in Spain last year. And to be like, oh, I was there. Yeah, I stood there. I stood on those steps. It's cool. I was on Chandril because that was, one of the places in Spain also. So it's kind of fun to see. And at the same time, I hate to say it, but it flattened Coruscant for me. I feel like, where's all the levels to Coruscant? It didn't. And the only time you feel the levels is when Lonnie's in the elevator. But other than that, it just because I recognize too many locations, it flattens it out for me. It's just like any city. It doesn't have all the layers that I miss the layers. But the Gorman people, I mean, the clothes, everything. And then, yes, Jeff, one more thing to give you that French influence is when you see Cyril walking to work, they have a guy dressed up like the baker from the cartoon Beauty and the Beast.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh my gosh. The little hat, the big apron. He turns with his pot of whatever he's carrying. I was it looked, like your classic cartoony French baker.
Yeah, and Cyril, I think he's wearing a beret in this one, or that comes later, but at some point he wears a beret, which I don't know if that's the traditional Gorman garment or if it's just what he chooses to wear because he's Cyril and has a very specific style that he likes. But yeah, it definitely is very reminiscent of France. And I mean, they talk about that they're the one product economy, that they have to import everything because the only thing they export is the silk and clothing and things like that, except for this mineral that has now been discovered that the Empire's, wants and will eventually get to. But what about you, John? Any thoughts on the Ghormans? Just kind of the setting of it, at least, before we kind of get into more of the details of the meetings and whatnot.
The setting, it's been a while since I've been in France, but it kind of, it has that feeling, I guess. But it's also, though, for me, is the people, it's they do seem like, even though I get, kind of naive, as a general, it's like they're not used to wanting to build this kind of rebellion. So even when they're protesting and stuff, they don't seem like such a threat. And then, they seem like nice people overall. And it's, you can see obviously later on when you talk, with the meetings and stuff, but it's just the initial feeling though is like, these seem like a good, honest people and they know something's wrong, but it's like, they don't seem like even a threat or too much of a threat as, to like a military or a big force like the Empire would be, or, the Imperial forces. So, I mean, they seem like a gentle, a peace and prosperity kind of people like they get mentioned though.
Yeah, they're definitely like not really much of a military threat, and they even talk about how Grand Moff Tarkin landed his ship on a crowd of Ghormans. I forget, it was like right after the Empire was formed. He landed a ship, so there was already a Ghorman massacre, and we're building up to another one. And that's that's coming from Rebels, so not spoiling anything that's happened in the Star Wars story. But yeah, and there's a lot of controversy on Gorman because they have a memorial dedicated to this, but then the Empire's building an armory there. And you already know that Dedra's, like, she told Krennic in the first episode, I think it was the first one, that the way to do it is to kind of get a rebellion started and then be able to crush it, and build it up, and kind of they even call her a spin doctor later in the episode, where she's creating this narrative and using even like the marketing guys in the first episode who were talking about how Ghormans were too, thought they were better than everyone, and it's just kind of setting this narrative that the Ghormans are, think they're better than everyone, and which we see later when Mon's trying to work in the Senate, and it's not going well because everyone's like, oh, those Ghormans, they're just causing trouble, because there's just so much, like the media is involved with spinning that too. So yeah, there's a lot of setup and a lot of like little things that are kind of been sprinkled in throughout the show that are starting to, like seeds are kind of starting to come to fruition here.
Well,
yeah,
I was going to say,
Cyril is. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in the beginning, when you first see Cyril too, it took me until the second time to see it. But then when you're watching it and then you see him looking in the mirror, then in the background, you can see he's being watched by somebody. And then, then the moment he turns his head, the guy looks down or away or whatever. And it's so obvious. And it's like, yeah, these people aren't, used to being spies, or, it's like tracking and stuff.
It was interesting because they changed the opening music to sound almost like a spy thriller. But as far as spying abilities go, like you said, it's all gentle people and, inept little Cyril trying to feel like he's important because she's not his girlfriend, by the way, just so everybody knows. There's no real relationship between those two. She's playing him all along, and he's gladly playing off of it because he's got a chick who's a power play and lets him feel like he's, yay, in with authority. So...
I don't think she does care for him, but I think it's kind of, her duty's more to the Empire.
She does not care for that man at all.
No, I disagree. I think we'll see in future episodes that she does. Maybe not. I mean, she's probably never had real relationships, so it's in a very twisted way, but I think she does at least have affection for him, and, feels, has some remorse about using him.
She has affection for him like somebody does for an ugly puppy. Quite honestly. He's convenient.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Cyril is good at his job, though. His not his ISB job, or like his side job or whatever, but I think he is good at his like day job of I think it's the Bureau of Standards. I think previously I was saying something else, but like, I think he is good. Like, that's the kind of job he would be good at. Someone who can just look at Excel sheets all day and track down shipping orders and things like that. So he's much better at this than being a cop. But I think he is good at his job. But he really wants to kind of get back into the action, like he was on the the planet in the first season, where he was a corporate security, and I think he wants to get into the ISB. I think is kind of his ultimate goal, and he sees Dedra as a way. He's at least able to thinks he can work for them doing that. So, but yeah, we get an Edie sighting as well. Has the phone call with his mom that was Dedra promised that she would have him, and that Cyril would call her twice a month. So I wonder if this is one of those twice monthly calls. But we get a call from Edie. So,
hey, you got to spin it. So you set it up. He's going to talk a lot with his mom, and they're going to listen to him. And she knew the long game.
Yeah. At first, when I first saw that scene of them listening, at first I thought it was Clea listening in, because it's kind of dark in the underground. But then you quickly see it's not her. It's the Gormans. I forget that girl's name, who is the kind of like one of the principal Gormans that we meet and get to know in this and the other episodes. But yeah, it's all it's interesting kind of seeing the spy game kind of play out, that Luthen knows about this guy Rylance who helped a rebel pilot once. So he's like, there's a contact here, but I don't know if they can really help us. So Luthen's trying to figure things out, and like he knows something's happening on Gorman because Dedra's involved, because Lonnie told him, but he doesn't want to commit anything yet. So he's going to send Cassie in there to kind of try to figure things out and see if they're even worth helping, or if just it's going to be one of those things that we're going to sacrifice the Gormans to let the rest of the rebellion able to continue on. But what did y'all think about Lonnie's story in this episode? We got to see him in the meetings with the ISB with Geert as the guy who took over the Axis desk from Dedra, and kind of has a little bit of a tiff with Dedra over that, because he's like, I'll help you, I'll do whatever, and he's kind of giving her like, oh, you were taken off this, so it's now my job. What did y'all think about this? Because I think this is the first appearance of Geert that we see the other ISB guy. What did y'all think of that scene?
Well, I would think it's final. Now you understand how Lonnie's beginning to get his information. He's kind of the trusted guy with this group, where everybody, it's like everybody is hard, or they're afraid of the higher ups, porta guys and stuff. But it's like Lonnie's there speaking up and then taking the heat off of them, and then they appreciate it. And then I think that's how he's getting his information. But it was interesting though too. You see, because of his ability to, or when he does then give the information that he learns a little bit, it's like you can see the stress on Luthen as well, because he's like, okay, these windows, we can't be this long anymore. You can just tell things are ratcheting up, in this year, that things are moving faster and the information needs to be quicker and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I like the Lonnie character because, like I said, you can see him, and I guess that's why his coworkers like him too. So, he's easy to approachable and give the answer that he needed to give, but also take the heat off of them.
Yeah, he's like playing perfect collaborator, but man, you can feel the tension. You just, just don't say the wrong thing the wrong way, Lonnie. You're just like walking that edge line. You really worry about him all the time.
Yeah, because didn't he also say in the first season that he had a kid or something? Or
yeah. Well, Luthen kind of threatens him. It's like, you just had a daughter. Congratulations. Like, he's telling Lonnie, like, I know your family. I know where they are. And I can, if you don't help me, then, they're going to be in trouble, because, I'll turn you into the ISB, or I'll take care of him myself or something. So, I like Lonnie getting, Lonnie's a really interesting character in this series. So I'm glad we're getting a little bit more of him this season as we go. But yeah, and then Geert and Dedra, like I said, have a little bit of a tiff over, because everyone kind of thinks Gorman is just kind of a waste of of everything. Like, so because she was kind of sent there and making it think, everybody kind of thinks it's a bad assignment and that she's been kind of punished by having to take it. But it's really kind of one of the Emperor's pet projects through Krennic to get the material that they need here, and they need to set up all the excuses to get it. And it's kind of all, it's Dedra's full-time job right now is getting all this kind of setting all this up. So yeah, like I said, a lot of interesting spycraft here, because then Luthen, like I said later, is talking to Cassian and saying, I don't know if these people will be useful, but let's find out. And so, I do like kind of the upping of the spycraft here. So, I don't know if y'all had any thoughts on Luthen's conversation with Cassian, because we don't get a ton of it. We get the Lonnie scene with Luthen, and then we get the Cassian scene. I think that might be about it though for this episode. But what did y'all think of his meeting with Cassian there at the end?
I just always wonder what else he's playing. I don't like the man. He's more evil than the Emperor sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, he does say I have to use my enemy's tactics to, I'll burn my future for a sunrise I'll never see, and all that from the first season is what he says. So, yeah, he's a really interesting character.
The means justify the ends, but I don't think so. I mean, I guess, as a Catholic, it's like, wow, we are really missing a moral compass in a lot of these characters. It feels like, I guess, because we've gone through a point in recent church history of having so many people, Catholic by name, or younger kids just saying that they have no religion. This feels like Star Wars with no religion. It just feels like there's something big missing. It's hollow feeling sometimes, which I think makes it scary, makes it worse.
Yeah, because in the, when Andor and Bix are talking about the soldier they had to kill, and it's just throughout this episode and even other episodes, it seems like Andor and Luthen make their decisions and they base it on, look, this is war and this has to be done. And then you have questions like Bix, and did you really have to do that? Or what's the difference? It's like, the person saw your face, so I had to kill him. And then it's like, does it make a difference if it's war or not? It was just kind of, but they seem to be using war as a, or as they go into this, as it becomes more war, that as the excuse for all their actions, or the reason that they may have those actions. And if you question, well, could there be a different way of doing it? They just kind of look at it as this had to be done, and this is pretty much the only way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, the lack of religion thing, I mean, that's kind of, that's almost intentional though, with both in the Empire and in the show, because the Empire purged the Jedi, and there's the average person probably at this point thinks either the Jedi are legends, and we're never, could they really move things with their minds and things like that? Because most, your average person probably didn't interact with the Jedi much. And even, by now they're probably starting to forget. It's really just a few people who kind of aren't buying into the Empire's narrative of what happened. So I think it's almost intentional that, your average person doesn't really believe in the Force anymore, doesn't really understand it, because, the major religion, essentially, even though they're not, Jedi aren't really a religion, but, for lack of a better word, they essentially are, they were wiped out, and there's nothing took their place other than, the state took their place. So.
Oh, the dark side has clouded everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the show kind of is intentionally, I think, doing that to kind of reflect that it's like the galaxy's wider. Most of the shows and things have focused on the force sensitive characters, or force adjacent characters, but the show's kind of done the opposite of that. So, but yeah, talking about we mentioned Bix, so I guess we could jump to there. I had some notes on here about her because at this point Bix has been through the ringer, both with season 1 with Dr. Gorst and then the assault in the last season, and she's definitely having dealing with her trauma, or trying to deal with her trauma. And we see her and at first when they were having that vision, or she was having that dream, I didn't understand exactly what that what was going on with that, because it's Dr. Gorst talking to her, and I thought, oh, she's just having another like terror vision of Dr. Gorst. But then you find out that they were on a mission for Luthen of some sort, which again, I want kind of these fill-in stories, so hopefully we get them down the road. But I also like the kind of just the slice of life of they're bored in a safe house and they're trying to like pass the time, and they have to go to the bodega to get to get groceries and things. What did y'all think of those scenes with Cassian and Bix?
It definitely feels like what happened in a lot of countries when they had communism or very heavy regimes take over, because everything's gray, everything's empty. The place where they're staying is just a block of cement, which is pretty typical of what happened. Like even I have a friend in Poland who talked about the worst thing that ever happened when communism took over, as she grew up in it, was that everything went gray. Everything was grayed out. There was no color. There was nothing. And so that was something that had to be fought against. You're stuck in these little flats of gray concrete. So there was definitely that feeling there. So it kind of like really brought down the depression level. When I saw Bix having that waking nightmare, right away, I was like, she's using something, which does get revealed later. But it's like, yeah, it's just to have a vision like that and the way she was acting and stuff. It's like, yeah, that's kind of weird. And then just Cassian's paranoia with everything was feeding her terror more. Like we said, she's 2 years out from being tortured on Ferrix and 1 year out from having to, watch Brasso, who's like a brother, be left in a grain field and had, survived a rape attempt. So a lot of trauma.
Yeah. Bix is, not to spoil too much, but it does improve for her. I'll just say that. So I'm glad they don't kind of keep grinding her down too much, because that would just get depressing. But in this arc, she's definitely struggling. But her and Cassian are, I don't know that it was at the end of season 1 that they were really in a relationship of any sort, because she had just been rescued and was, when we see her on Mina Rao, it's not really clear if they were in any kind of relationship other than being friends. But they are in a relationship here, which I thought was interesting. I'm glad we'll get a little bit more of that in the show, but I would like to know kind of how that developed. Is it just like they came together as a convenience thing, or did they actually have deep feelings for each other or whatever? So maybe something again down the road that we'll get in a book or something. But
it also seems like part of Bix's trauma.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say that when she's talking to Andor at one point, she says, or talking about the paranoia and, about the cameras and the park and all these things. And, of course, it keeps bringing up it's war. Then she said, because he doesn't want to lose her. Or he wants to say, he's saying stuff like, I don't want to lose you again. And then she'll say, that's not up to us anymore. You can't protect me and stuff. And then when she says, if it's a war, then it's not up to us what we save or what we lose. And I think that's the big thing with this, as they're getting more into the war, it's like they have so much of a lack of control on things. Like they want to, Cassian wants to protect Bix, but Bix wants to do more. And then even, and she's feeling held back. then they're bouncing around, and it's like, can we leave stuff here? Can we can we pretty up this place and stuff? And you can see that the difficulties are, just dealing with it, because it's, they come across as living a normal life for that minute when they're in the market, or they talk about going for the walk and stuff. But then at the same time, they're always on edge because of this war that's building, or that they see that's building that not everybody sees. And I just find that interesting too. It's how they deal with the not having the ability, or the lack of control now in their lives, because they have only a little bit that they can control. And then everybody, whether it's Luthen calling them for the next mission, or they're being tracked by the Imperials, or whoever are on the lookout for that and stuff. It's, I think that was pretty interesting with as you see how that begins, or how that's evolving as we go forward.
Yeah, because going back to the ISB, Dedra does name drop Andor, and that they don't have an identity for Luthen. They just know that it's an old man that they think is Axis, but they don't know who he is. So their only link is that they know of is Andor. And so yeah, his concern is definitely justified, because it seems like the Empire's stepping up their surveillance and everything. So he could easily be recognized and caught on a camera, and the ISB would find him. So definitely feeling his anxiety there. And when he goes out, he has the coat on, he puts the hood up. He tries to stay distant from even the shopkeeper to, just so that if somebody looks at him, they would have a harder time identifying him. But he ends up kind of talking to the shopkeeper anyway, because the guy's kind of flirting with Bix a little bit. I'll get you these, these good melons for your meal or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny too, because they have Bix's identity also. So just the fact that they're on Coruscant in the middle of all of this. I know Cassian made the comment of, we can hide in the insanity of the city or whatever he said. But at the same time, I feel like that is not a spot that would, if I was in that situation, I would not feel comfortable being in. That's like being, in a box in the middle of the trap kind of thing. It's like, you got to stay in your box or you're gone. So it seems to be just adding to the stress. I don't know if it could be just Luthen putting the extra stress on both of them to try to manipulate them, because that's what he does, manipulate people. I mean, he did work with Bix before he even worked with Cassian, before he even knew who Cassian was. So.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of stress going with everyone. I think everyone's feeling and even the Empires even the Imperials are feeling the stress of, Hirt is feeling the stress of Axis. Dedra's feeling the stress of needing something to happen on Gorman to kind of justify what she's been doing. And so yeah, definitely. And then of course, Cassian, Bix, and Luthen are all feeling it from, they need something. They need to do something to kind of make themselves feel useful. Because I've never been in the military or anything, but I've kind of heard that the downtime in between can be some of the hardest things, because you're waiting for the shoe to drop, and you don't know when it's going to happen or what you're going to have to do. And so the time in between can be harder. Well, not harder, but can be hard too sometimes. So. All right, and then kind of the last part, that there's really only one scene in this episode, because again, this is kind of the buildup, is Mon Mothma is kind of working the Senate to try to stop a bill that's coming in that will grant the ISB and the Empire more powers and broaden their powers. So, and she's even kind of working with the Gorman senator to try to build a coalition against this. But what did y'all think of Mon's scenes here?
Yeah, she was trying. I don't know. She was there. It's just kind of, it seemed like filler. Unfortunately. I mean, we needed it. We needed to see how they're trying to work through it. It was Nice to see the Gorman representative, and he wants a peaceful solution, which was nice to see. But yeah, it was interesting. I feel like Mon Mothma's role in the rebellion has been completely undermined in this show. So I know she was contributing money the first season or whatever, that's her big thing, but she seemed much more involved before any of this even happened, all the way back in the Clone Wars. So yeah, it's kind of weird seeing her like not being the leader that she felt like.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think at this point she knows the system isn't working, but she's still like they're not ready yet for kind of a full out war, and right now there's only a couple cells really fighting against the Empire in any kind of significant way. They're not ready yet, and so I think she's still trying to, maybe at this point she still has kind of a hope that maybe something can happen in the Senate to stop it and to improve things, but you also kind of get the sense that the Senate itself is just there to kind of give people a false sense of security at this point, because once they have the Death Star, they don't need the Senate. We hear that in A New Hope, that the Emperor has dissolved the Senate because they have the Death Star and can threaten anyone into submission, and they don't need the Senate to control their populations anymore. They can just threaten them, and anyone would cave because it's your planet will be destroyed. So I did, I like that it's, I don't like it, but I like it for the story that it's kind of ramping things up, and you're just kind of seeing everyone's having this false sense of security, this false, they think they have a voice, but they really don't. And their voice really doesn't matter, because it's all going to be, it's all just giving lip service to the Empire at this point, really. And the Emperor's agenda is happening no matter what anyone in the Senate wants. So, what did you think of her scenes, John?
I just think they ended up adding more to the stress that everybody's feeling, because besides the Gorman representative and Mon Mothma, you have the other senators that she's talking to, and you can tell that, is it because they think everything's going well, or are they just afraid of what the Gorman senator is and chafing the Emperor and then getting on the bad side of that? And it just seems like that, because she's pointing out all these good places in the past, all this crime is up now. And is that because, I'm assuming because they're seeing injustice and you're having people standing up. And then, of course, according to Lonnie, they're just arresting too many people. So that's probably part of it too. But maybe that's in the game, in the plan too, to say, look at the crime rate. It's way up because we're arresting, 38 people in this one case or whatever it is. But I think, she didn't have much of a role in this. But I think it was just mainly to show I guess also to show the lack of support there is to try to help a place like Gorman as well, because, all these people, all these other senators seem to have their own, they're more obviously have to be worried about their planets or whatever, so I think that was, the short scenes for that just kind of laid out that more so.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it is every, even if they're playing lip service to the Empire, they're probably scared of what can happen to their own planet if they turn against the Empire. So they're kind of having to, they're having to hedge their bets there. And you only have a couple senators like Mon and Bale who are doing anything to try to stop it or to try to build up a resistance. But yeah, the resistance is not there yet. Aside from a couple cells here and there, but it hasn't really come together. And I think Mon's big takeover or becoming leader of the rebellion is a you'll see that in the story down the road. So That is coming. I think now it's just she still has to play this part of the senator, and she's known as being someone who would try to fight for people with whatever she can. In this case, in the Senate. So, and then the last kind of little bit of story that we touch on here, although there's really just one scene, is Woolman getting to Saw Gerrera's base to try to teach them how to use this machine to extract Rhydonium fuel. And at first I didn't realize Dakar, what place that was, but then you see it and you're like, oh yeah, that's the Resistance base in Force Awakens. So, but what did y'all think of this scene with Woolman and Saw?
At first I could not believe that they let Woolman be there with Saw, but then it's Luthen. He doesn't care where he puts people, hey, go hang out with the glue sniffer. I mean, fuels, it's just like, yeah, that just creeped me out. I felt bad for Woolman being there. I get it. He's a smart kid and knew how to rig these things. It also reminded me of scenes in the Timothy Zahn Thrawn trilogy where we're introduced to how Thrawn ended up in the Empire, because Thrawn was working to try to find these rebel cells that were stealing fuel, and I think at one point in time they had rigged up the fuel to explode when Thrawn got to them or something like that, like it blow up the ship or something. But yeah, so the fuel's explosive. I mean, we found out about it on Rebels. We always talked about using those fuel cells as bombs too. Especially Sabine, she likes those.
I thought it was I thought it was interesting, I guess. I mean, I liked the fact that you had all those you see actually like as X-wings that come in with the ships and stuff, and then you start seeing a little bit with you feel like this is more about a little bit about a rebellion and stuff, but or you see the beginnings of it a little bit more, at least with the ships, I thought. But and I guess it was good groundwork or explaining. I felt bad for Woolman too, but it was good to explain, all the different things that the what's it called, the Rhydonium
Rhydonium
impacts you, whether it's inside, outside, or explosively, I guess. But I mean, that was it was definitely a different feel from the rest of the show.
Yeah,
especially with Saw Gerrera's interest in the smell of it and his enjoyment of the smell of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you start to see like Saw has really kind of started to crack, because in season 1 he still was fairly lucid most of the time in the couple scenes that we had, and in this one he's definitely kind of starting to lose it a little bit. Probably because he's huffing that Rhydonium, those fumes, because I think in this one he talks about how he was kind of forced to be a miner for a while. I don't remember the timeline if that was before he was introduced in the Clone Wars or if that came after the Empire took over and he did that for a time before.
It was after that or after.
Okay. Yeah. So he kind of found that experience, and I mean, he's had a rough life and it's hard to fault somebody for that, but yeah, it definitely doesn't seem like he's doing great. At least, personally. I mean, he's leading this huge cell, like one of the bigger cells or groups, I think, is his partisans. And you actually get to see we haven't seen too many aliens in this show, but we actually get to see a lot of and some of them are characters from Rogue One that we see survive. So I did like kind of seeing them around in this episode. We saw a few alien senators, but other than that, I think that's kind of been it so far in this season of Andor. There was a couple in season 1 too, but Yeah, woman. It's interesting thinking. I've seen ahead, of course, so without spoiling, but it's like, what kind of influence will a young, impressionable, fiery rebel have? What kind of impression will Saul have on that? So on that kind of a person. But yeah, it's kind of
like the way he was corrupting Sabine and Ezra and Rebels.
Yeah. Well, not in the timeline that hasn't happened yet. This is still kind of before this. I think in this time, he hasn't even gone to Geonosis yet, which is that was in season 3 of Rebels, and this is kind of taking place around season 2, season 3. So he's not quite there yet, at least in the if the timeline matches up to some extent. So, yeah, Saw's definitely an interesting character, and I glad we got him, but I kind of wish there had been a little bit more focus on him in this show too. Just because he was a really interesting character to see in Rogue One and Rebels and Clone Wars. But yeah, that's kind of the main. Like I said, this episode was a lot of table setting, a lot of setup for kind of the payoff at the end. So the next one does have a little bit more action heavy, or getting ready for that. And then of course the final one of the arc is the action one. But any final thoughts on this before we kind of wrap up on this episode?
Just some interesting small visuals. The spider messages for Cyril. Him playing spy with his little twill of floss on his door. All that fun little stuff for him. Of course, they're all watching him, so I'm sure they're laughing hysterically watching him do this. And then an interesting visual is watching Cassian and Biggs right before he leaves, and they're kind of flirting with touching each other's hands. She actually traces a cross on Cassian's hand, but then Cassian traces like the Andor symbol on her hand, because he scoops around her palm and then goes up through the middle, so it kind of looks like the symbol you see in the opening of the show. And then just one other thing that was interesting was in the beginning with the arc with Bix and Cassian. Bix wants curtains. She wants the windows covered. We have to do something about the windows. And then later on, she's looking out the window and she sees the light go on. And that's Luthen's bat signal for Cassian. So, it's like, it made me feel like, okay, was she trying to remove herself more from Luthen, but at the same time, she's still willing to do things. It was interesting. Unless she just wants Cassian out of the house so that then she can sit in front of the window and take her little blue drops and forget who she is for a while.
Yeah, and I think I'd read or seen that somebody said if you watch how they're kind of tracing their hands, it actually forms the Alliance Starbird symbol too. So, but yeah, that was a really cool thing.
Yeah, that's what I meant when I said the show opening symbol. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah.
But she does a different symbol on his hand.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd heard that, but I didn't really go back and pay attention to it to see. So. Very cool. Anything else from you, John?
I think going back a little bit, when they did their town hall meeting or whatever you want to call that.
Oh yeah, we didn't even talk about that.
When they, air their grievances of what they see it's going on, and then Cyril finally gets the chance to meet Ryland. It sounds like Ryland is concerned about things, and the Gorman front is there, but he seems like he's coming up. He would kind of like to use Cyril partly as just like, well, maybe you could give some, give us some positive press with your superiors, or what can we do to make it do better in the situation? Whereas everybody, the crowd is just pretty much, okay, we know there's this going on, that's going on, and whatever, but okay, is it an armory? Another person says a prison, maybe, or something, and And I just kind of, so it seems like Ryland, maybe can put together a front, but it also seems like he is trying to be diplomatic as well with how, things are going to go with what he's trying to do. But if he has to take it to a military or rebellious level, he's willing to do that. But I think he seems to be also trying to be diplomatic because they are seeking peace and prosperity, and he wants that being told to the people above. The Cyril, I guess.
Yeah, we hadn't talked about the meeting. Yeah, Cyril goes to try to, because he's invited by the Ghormans, by someone from the front to go attend this meeting and meet Rylance, and kind of, you can definitely tell that they're like, everybody in this show is kind of playing each other, like, to get advantage and to get information. So you think Cyril's getting information from them, they're probably trying to get information from Cyril and try to work each other for whatever they can. Yeah. So,
but I kind of wonder too, it's with the information, and maybe I'm off base on this, but as when you think about like World War II and when Nazis took over and things, it's like, I wonder, what kind of things were being said as they were building the prison camps and things like that, because, or what's going on in the background. And, because, as they're thinking, this could be a prison, this could be an armory, they're going to arrest us, they're going to put us in prison or whatever, it makes you wonder, what the citizen, who were taken over by the Nazis were thinking when things were being done, and besides obviously the atrocities and stuff, but, when they saw, could they believe that something like a prison camp or, would be being built in their same town and stuff? And I just kind of wonder if that was kind of like a little feel of this, is that, we don't know what all this stuff is. That's what we want to know, because they want to put people's mind at ease, but people's mind go to what their biggest fears. And I don't know, maybe I just wonder if that was something back in World War II, especially, where, people were wondering with all the rumors that were coming about, and how that obviously would stir up fear, as well as all the atrocities they were seeing locally as well.
Yeah. And the Empire's, it's 100% based on Nazi Germany. Like, I think that's pretty clear. And George Lucas, I think, is said basically to that effect, that they're stormtroopers, which is something from Nazi Germany.
Mm-hmm.
So, that meeting was really interesting. And like you said, people are airing their grievances, and Rylance is trying to keep the peace, but people are starting to get antsy and want answers and want to know what's going on. What can they do? How do they resist? And it's building up to something that we'll see in the show. So, all right. Well, any other thoughts on this episode before we close out?
I'll just say one last thing. It's interesting to see the different views of the people that know what's going on or have a good idea, and the people that don't. They're kind of living naively. It's like, and how the leaders, like whether it's a Luthen or whether it's Deidre or whoever, how they use that lack of knowledge to help them, or they know, I guess they know what's at stake. Even Mon Mothma sees a lot of things, and so many people either don't see that, or they're just naive, or they think they're doing something for better. And it's interesting to see how the people that do know take advantage of that as they go forward.
Yeah, it's a lot of misinformation, a lot of stuff going on, and only a few people really know the truth of who the Empire is, or who the Emperor is, and what they're capable of. So, all right. Anything else from you, Kathryn?
Nope, that's it.
Nothing. All right. Well, that is it for this episode of The Secrets of Star Wars. We'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons, including Jeff V, Lindsay S., Alfredo B., Edward G., and Michael S. Their generous donations help us to create the Secrets of Star Wars and all the shows here at StarQuest, and you can join them at sqpn.com/give. Now I'd love to hear from you, our listeners. What did you think of this episode of Andor? You can let us know by sending us an email at starqueststarwars@sqpn.com, on our social media pages, or by leaving a comment on our channel on the StarQuest Discord server, which you can find at sqpn.com/discord. And we have a specific spoiler channel for Star Wars and even specific threads for these sets of Andor episodes. So if you haven't watched ahead, you can read what the conversation was and wherever you're at. So until next time, Jon Koral, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Wars.
Thank you. I'm glad I was able to eventually connect there.
Thank you, Kathryn Laffrey.
Thank you, Jeff.
And once again, I'm Jeff Haecker. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Wars on StarQuest.
Here's another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy, The Secrets of Star Trek. Find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/StarTrek.